My name is Mohamed. I last fall went over to the West Bank. My initial goal in going there was just to go over there, like do some humanitarian volunteer work, come back here and try to raise awareness. I started off for about 3 months teaching in a city called Nablus, mostly in the refugee camps, but also in like other community centers around there. And through doing that, I got connected to a lot of other organizations, and by the end of it, I ended up working with this Palestinian nonviolent protest group, doing programming for them, and also doing this programming for a human rights-related documentary project. And yeah, so in one of the protests that the protest group I was working with put on, I was arrested, and a little bit later, I was told I was banned from the country for 5 years, and here I am. So yeah, that's me. So before I get into the talk, I'd like to go through a little bit of history, just so history of the region, just so people know terms like what I'm talking about when I refer to certain things. This is gonna be really brief and glance over a lot of important details, but it's the way it's got to be. Otherwise, I could talk about this for like an hour. So basically, around 1900, you have intense persecution of Jews in Europe. And many of them there decided the only way that they can be safe and the only way that they can be safe from persecution is to have their own state somewhere. And they decided to make the state in what was then Palestine because of historical, religious reasons, what have you. They slowly started moving in and took up what you see as the white spaces right here. Mutual violence from both sides. At the time, it was a colony of Britain. Mutual violence from both sides culminated in a war in 1948, where Israel became this white part right here, and these two parts, the West Bank, which is this green part right here, became part of Jordan, and this part right here, the Gaza Strip, became part of Egypt, or at least administered by them. They never became fully part of those countries. And also, in the process of that, you have 7/8 of the original inhabitants of this white part, what became Israel. 7/8 of them fleeing and becoming war refugees. And those, whenever you hear Palestinian refugees, that's what those are referring to. They live all over the region, also in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Over 1 million of them still living in refugee camps. There was also after that, after the 48 war, a lot of persecution of Jews in Arabic countries, like native Jews that were Arabic-speaking Jews, lived in those countries for long times. Many of them also fled and came to Israel as the only place that they had to go. And they now make up approximately 40% of Israel, which is a kind of an interesting dynamic. Anyway, in 1967, another war broke out, and Israel captured these two remaining parts, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and has been occupying them ever since. Now, up until this point, if you talk to someone who's pro-Israel or pro-Israeli policy, they'll at least people that the rational argument that I've heard is that, at least in my mind, is that, look, a lot of bad stuff happened, but it's for the greater good. Like, all that bad shit that happened is a necessary evil. Why did all those refugees now have to be let back into their country? Because they did, it wouldn't be a Jewish state, the Jews wouldn't have a homeland, and there would have been a Holocaust somewhere else, something like that. But what you can't justify self-defense, and what I haven't seen most people who are pro-Israeli policy do, try to justify self-defense, is after they captured the West Bank over here, they started expropriating little bits of land all over it, literally dotting the entire thing, until the map looks like this. And all the rest of those are pretty much land that's been expropriated by the state of Israel, and then have their civilians move into there and start taking up these little bits of expropriated land, completely against the Geneva Conventions. And there's a reason for that. What you have now in the West Bank is a situation where you have two populations living side by side, the Palestinians and Israeli settlers, where one of them has citizenship and one of them has almost no rights at all. And you have two populations living side by side whose interests conflict, living in the same region, treated extremely differently by the state that controls them. And that may sound legalistic and bookish, but that leads to a lot of really fucking ugly situations on the ground when you get into it. And when I first got started with activism, like, on this cause about a year and a half ago, I was really surprised to find out, talking to my roommate who had been in the IDF and was a really close friend of mine, talking to pro-Israeli policy advocates on campus, I was really surprised to find out that many of them didn't support this. Many of them either would say, you're right, that was a bad idea, that was unwise, or many of them would straight up say, look, that was an immoral thing, I don't support that at all. But when and when I went to Israel, I spent the weekends in Tel Aviv a lot with a good friend that lived over there, in Haifa, other places. And I found that the same thing, the same situation over there. But what I did notice is many of them either downplayed how severe the situation was there, and downplayed how severe an impact on the average Palestinian life these settlements had on them, and also didn't really seem to understand that this is the main reason why 95% of Palestinians you talk to don't believe that the average Israeli wants peace. You can preach all you want on TV, you can have people like me come over there and tell them no, but they do all you want. People are going to believe what they see. If you're living in your village and every day you have to worry about whether that settler across the hill is going to come and squat on your land and take it from you, and the Israeli army is going to come protect them at no matter what, whether what they're doing is legal under Israeli law or not, then you're going to believe what you see. You're going to believe that, look, they keep taking more and more and more land, what's going to happen to me? They keep thinking, what most of them think is the average Israeli wants to kick them all out to Jordan, and that they're all going to be homeless refugees soon, if they don't do something. So my goal in this talk is really to impress upon you, like, one, the severity of the situation in the West Bank, to just average people who are trying to live their lives, and also how much this whole settlement project contributes to fuels the conflict and prevents a peace agreement, which is disastrous to both sides. So, and as Americans, this is really important for us to know why, because we fund this to a large degree. And because so much of our money goes into it, we have a large say in what goes on there. For example, in Gulf War I, when Bush I didn't want any more settlements because he didn't want to piss off any of the Arabs, he said, look, we'll cut your loan guarantees if you build one more settlement. And guess what? They stopped. After the war was done, okay, do whatever you want. All of us have the ability to make a huge difference in this through our government, basically. And to people that are Israeli or pro-Israeli, or who have connections to Israel, I honestly think from my time being there that like many liberal Israelis, like left-wing Israelis at least, if they became aware of the severity of this and how much it's detrimental to them, that perhaps they'll stop looking the other way at this and start speaking out about it as well. So with that, let me get into like the main talk. These are the major issues I'm going to touch on, like in this talk. I'm going to try to like touch upon each of these issues and then give an example, like from my personal experience of being there, things I've seen or experienced myself. The first one is land expropriation. There's several ways this is done. Either the Israeli government claims something is state land, usually using an Ottoman law from 1858 that says if land is uncultivated, the Sultan has the right to claim it for himself, which the Israeli state still employs to this day, and I guess interprets it as it being the Sultan.